stand, please.
That's it.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The next item is a motion to approve the agenda as presented.
If possible, can I move to amend the agenda under 17? Can we revisit the Don Snyder issue?
We can revisit it, yep, and I know that Tom had some comments on that as well, because I asked him for that. I don't have the amount, but we can certainly talk about it.
Okay. I think he's here this evening.
I don't have.
Too, so.
I'm sorry? Number
17.
17, under refund of excess payments? No, he's trying to add that to the agenda. He's amending that as another topic under refunds of excess payments. Is there a second to the amended agenda?
Second.
Moved by Ben?
Yeah.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion passes. Okay, approval of minutes, February 15, 2017. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
I'll make that.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
I actually-
Go ahead.
I had actually meant to.
1 minute, 1 minute,
Sorry.
one.
I did
Okay.
read those. I meant to change that. There's a number of statements that are attributed to me that are not accurate, but I.
All right, let's wait till next time then.
Okay.
Want to withdraw?
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Withdraw.
we'll
Withdraw
wait
the
till
second.
next time
Yeah.
and add those on.
Mm-hmm.
Add to the next agenda. Okay. Under communications and course.
Before we go on, I
Yes.
abstained from the last vote. I wasn't on the minutes. I think that was 15.
We're actually not approving them.
Oh, okay.
Those we're going to move to the next time.
Okay.
Okay. So there's no action under approval of minutes for tonight. Under communications and correspondence, I have nothing tonight. So we'll move to public comment. Is there any public comment? Okay. Then we'll go on to our annual audit presentation by Mahoney Sable. And tonight we're joined by Mike Van Devender, who is the partner in charge of our account, along with Heather Greatorex, his senior associate. Welcome.
Thank you. Again, my name is Mike Van Deventer. I'm a partner at Mahoney Sable, and ultimately I was responsible for overseeing the town's audit and issuing our reports. And I am joined by Heather Greatorex. Heather was the senior in charge on the audit and was ultimately responsible for the day-to-day field work. By this point in time, hopefully everyone on the board has received a copy of the financial statements as well as the single audit. I certainly encourage you in your role on the board to review those statements and any questions that you may have. You should ask those of management. Certainly we'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have tonight as well. I'm not going to go through those statements in detail. I do have a presentation that I'd like to run through. It does provide overall results of the audit and also some financial highlights. And again, please ask any questions as we go along. Jumping into slide 2, as far as the scope of work, we did perform an audit of the financial statements. We performed that audit in accordance with both the auditing standards issued by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, as well as the government auditing standards issued by the Government Accountability Office. In addition to the financial statement audit, we also performed a state single audit in accordance with the State Single Audit Act. We did not perform a federal single audit this year. There was an increase in the threshold from $500,000 to $750,000. Your total federal expenditures were approximately $550,000, so you did fall below that threshold. In addition to the state single audit, we did perform an agreed-upon procedures engagement on the end of school year reports for the Board of Education, and those procedures are required by the State of Connecticut Department of Education. All right. Any questions as far as the scope of work? Pretty straightforward. In connection with our work, we do issue a number of reports. The main report is the report on the financial statements. We did issue an unmodified clean opinion on your financial statements. That is the best opinion you can receive. Our opinion does provide reasonable assurance that the financial statements have been prepared in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles and that they are free from material misstatement, whether due to error or fraud. So we do not provide absolute assurance. We are not testing every transaction. There are estimates in the financial statements. So again, we do provide reasonable assurance. Our opinion does cover multiple statements within your financial statements for the town. It covers your governmental activities, the Gildersleeve Wheeler Educational Trust, which is a component unit, each of your major funds, which was the general fund, your capital projects fund, and your capital non-recurring fund. And then we also express an opinion on your aggregate remaining fund information, which includes all of your non-major special revenue funds, your pension and agency funds. And all those funds are detailed out in the supplemental information to the financial statements. All right. Any questions as far as the opinion on the financial statements? As required by government auditing standards, we do issue a report on compliance and on internal control over financial reporting. Here we are not actually expressing an opinion on your compliance with laws and regulations or on the effectiveness of your internal controls over financial reporting. To the extent we identify what we consider to be a material noncompliance with a law or regulation or a significant deficiency or material weakness in your internal control, we would be required to include it in this letter. And we did not identify any such items. So that is also a clean report. In connection with the state single audit, we issue a report on compliance and on internal control at the state financial assistance level. Here we are actually expressing an opinion on your compliance with your major programs. For fiscal years 2016, you had $5.9 million in state financial assistance, of which $1.2 million was considered non-exempt and subject to our testing. The major programs was the Open Choice Program, your Town Aid Road Grant, Small Town Economic Assistance Programs, and the Brownfield Remediation Program. And based on the results of our procedures, we did issue an unmodified clean opinion on compliance with those programs. And we did not identify any significant deficiencies or material weaknesses in your internal control over those programs. So no issues in connection with the state single audit. All right. And that concludes the reporting that was issued. Turning towards your financial highlights, this first slide here goes over your government-wide financial statements and shows a comparison between 2016 and 2015. The government-wide financial statements are prepared on a full accrual basis of accounting. It includes all of your assets, including your capital assets, and all your liabilities, including your long-term debt. And really, if you look year over year, there wasn't any significant changes, and you did have an overall slight improvement in your unrestricted net position. All right. And just to follow up on the government-wide financial statements on slide 6, the overall town net position did increase by $1.3 million. You did have capital asset additions of about $1.3 million, so you continue to invest in your infrastructure. You did have no new long-term debt during the year, and your overall debt did decrease by $2.3 million due to scheduled principal repayments. You do have net pension liabilities of approximately $10.8 million. That was about a $1.3 million increase over the prior year, and that's really driven by the performance of the market. The actual market performance was below the long-term expected rate of return, and so each year you could expect your net pension liability to fluctuate depending on the results of the market. You do also have an unfunded other post-employment benefit of approximately $2.3 million, and that was valued as of July 1st, 2014. This reflects the liability associated with post-employment health care benefits. This amount is not currently reflected in the financial statement. It is only included in the disclosures. This will be required to be recorded as a liability in your government-wide financial statement starting in fiscal year 2018. So that will have an impact on your unrestricted net position. All right. Any questions as far as the government-wide financial statements? Yes.
And Michael, on the pension liability, I believe I saw somewhere, the investment rate of return is estimated at 7.5%. And I assume that we didn't meet that target, so consequently, the number's down. My question is, isn't that somewhat optimistic, that figure, 7.5?
No, in fact, I think in general, that's one of the most significant estimates in terms of your financial statement is the discount rate that is used to calculate your net pension liabilities. We do look at third-party data, and overall, the long-term expected rate of return of pensions are roughly around 7 to 8%. The state of Connecticut still uses 8.5% for some of their plans. We do look at it in comparison with other municipalities and their pension plans as well. So again, this is the long-term expected rate of return. You will have years where you perform below that rate, but then there will be years where you'll have a better return than what's that's showing.
The reason
Yep.
I flagged it was because in reading a few articles recently, the articles indicated that generally nationwide appeared to be somewhat of a problem recently, where the expectation was rather high, and clearly,
Right.
I pointed out, I think it was Illinois, where they dropped theirs from 7.5 to 7, and that actually cost the state, or will cost somewhere between $400 and $500 million.
Right.
But the point being that recently, at least what I've read, is that there are some problems
Yep.
nationwide.
That is certainly an estimate that you want to review annually with your investment advisors as well as the actuary. Again, I think the rate that you utilize for fiscal year 2016 is a reasonable rate. The GASB standards do require you to disclose a sensitivity analysis, so users of the financial statement can understand what the impact would be if you decreased or increased that interest rate by 1%. And so that is also disclosed in the notes to the financial statements. That's a good question. Any other questions on the government-wide?
I think we're set. Next page, next slide.
All right, moving on to your governmental fund financial highlights. And again, this is on the modified accrual basis of accounting. It includes your general fund as well as all of your special revenue funds and capital project funds. Your combined ending fund balance as of year end was $8.4 million, which was an increase of $481,000 from the prior year. And that's broken down into the general fund. You had $5.9 million. Your capital projects fund had a deficit of $444,000. Your capital non-recurring fund had a fund balance of $1.1 million, and your other governmental funds had a fund balance of $1.7 million. And when we look at the overall financial health of the town, we do look at funds with deficit fund balances. Again, I listed out here, you do have the capital projects fund, the sewer operating fund, and the water operating fund. I know management and the board is aware of those deficits, and you continue to work towards addressing those. And again, the key is to continue to monitor those and work towards eliminating those deficits. An additional statement included in the financial statements is your general fund on a budgetary basis. Your original budget did contemplate a use of fund balance of $300,000. There were no additional appropriations that were authorized during the year. Your actual net change in fund balance was an increase of $365,000, which resulted in a favorable budgetary variance of $665,000. Your revenues were over budget by $209,000, primarily related to rental income. And your expenditures were under budget by $456,000, and that was really across all departments. All right. Any questions as far as the financial statements go?
Is there any long-term issue with the deficit in the water and sewer with the general fund picking up the balance?
Well, I mean, eventually you're going to want to fund those deficits.
I meant from a legal standpoint or from an auditing standpoint.
Yeah, I'm not aware of any compliance issues associated with that. That would be more of a legal question.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? All right, the next slide goes over our required communications. Again, these communications are required by our auditing standards. A lot of the communications resolve around if we ran into issues during the course of the audit, so a lot of this stuff does not apply, so I'll just quickly run through them. The first bullet here talks about our responsibilities under our auditing standards. Again, although we do assist in the preparation of the financial statements, they are the responsibility of management. Everything that is included in the financial statement did come from Tom's office. It's our responsibility to perform our procedures and express an opinion on those financial statements. In terms of the plan scope and timing of the audit, there were no changes in the scope of the audit, and the timing did go as planned. The town was ready for us, provided us all information required in a timely manner, and all reports were ultimately filed with the state prior to the December 31st deadline. In terms of significant audit findings, we do review your accounting policies and practices. There were no new GASB standards that had a significant impact on your financial statements for fiscal year 2016. We do review your disclosures, and we have concluded that those were neutral, consistent, and clear. And again, we do review your accounting estimates. And again, the most significant estimate was the discount rate involved in calculating the net pension liability. We did deem those to be reasonable. In terms of difficulties encountered in performing the audit, there were none. In terms of corrected and uncorrected misstatements, again, there were none as well. Town of Portland is actually one of few of my clients that we actually don't have audit adjustments on. So that is a good thing, for sure. We did obtain a management representation letter. There was nothing unique in that letter that we're required to inform you of. Again, we weren't aware of any consultations with any other independent accountants, and really no other audit findings or issues. All right? And that concludes our presentation.
Thank you.
Good job, Tom Robinson.
All right.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Heather. Did you want to add anything, Tom, at this point? The next item on the agenda is the appointment of the auditor, and you have in front of you a recommendation that the Board of Selectmen appoint Mahoney Sable to audit the books for the fiscal period July 1, 2016 through June 30, 2016. Excuse me, 17. Is there a motion? Kathy, is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Kitch. Discussion? Fred?
I'm saying because I use those, that's my account.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
How long have we been using this firm or derivation thereof?
Tom?
There's been a merger or name change?
Yep. Tom can answer that.
We're currently in a middle of a few years ago we passed a 5-year extension, and this is the 3rd year of that extension. We have had Mahoney, Mahoney and Sable since they've been in existence. That's probably been about 2013. Prior to that, the firm was Grant Thornton, and that was for a 2-year period. Prior to that, it was called CCR. So each one of those firms have had different internal control procedures. When we transitioned between each firm, it acted almost as a new engagement. There has been multiple engagement member changes throughout this time. There's been engagement partner changes, at least 3 partner changes on this. So there's been a lot of movement, there's a lot of activity, and we are in the midst of a 5-year agreement that we have. This is the 3rd year of that.
I assume that there's some recommended time period where you should change auditors to make this prudent?
No, I mean, everyone acts as an independent auditor. There's doesn't have to be any adjustment. It's as comfortable as we are with the process. It's been like you said, there was when I first got here, Rob Howard was the partner at CCR. We had engagements with him. Unfortunately, he passed away, and then there was another partner, Mr. Howe, and then a year or 2 ago, Mike Van Dievener became partner and was a partner on the engagement. Again, internal controls reviews have changed. The in charge has changed multiple times. So I mean, I'm very comfortable with this firm. They when I got here, there was upwards probably of a fee of like around $47,000, I believe. We have had them for a while now, and we are actually, I believe, at a $41,000 fee. So you know, our my management staff and my finance office and the Board of Eds. We work very hard and diligent to provide everything to be audited and auditable. And that's one of the key things that I think is required. We provide our work papers in each fund in a fund format, ready for audit. Those are then ready for the financial statement. Like Mike said, there was no audit adjustments, I believe, since I know for a fact since I've been here since '08, there's been no audit adjustments. So I think there's there's been very good control changes over the period, and I've seen it by the audits that have gone on. There's been numerous personnel changes, and there's been numerous partner changes, and in all of those, you see different types in different areas where they're hitting. So I think that we're in good shape with where we are, and that I think with this agreement, things are working well.
I mean, I'm fine with it now. I would just think that it would seem prudent to me that at some point that you would mix this up. It doesn't seem to make a lot of sense that it's the same group doing the oversight year after year after year. And I thought it was sort of our practice in the past to kind of mix this up, but it's just my comment. I'm just wondering what the standard was.
Okay, there's a motion been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? One abstention? Okay. Fred abstains. Thank you, congratulations, and thank you for your work. And thank you, Tom, and congratulations. Good work. In terms of the next item, item 9, I have asked Joe McQuaid to take a look at the ethics ordinance, which he did several years ago, and he needs a little more time to review that and bring it back to you. In the meantime, I don't know if you had any further questions. I don't like to take these off the agenda, even if there isn't a substantial amount of discussion, so that we don't forget it. Fred?
Yeah, I missed the last discussion on that. I've had an interest in that right along. Thanks, Ben. I have had an interest in that, seeing us do something. I think Bruce certainly sent a couple of letters, a couple of correspondence regarding his concerns. And I have similar concerns because I would hate to see folks get their enthusiasm for volunteering to various boards be diminished because of getting hauled in front of the ethics committee. And sometimes those things have consequences. I'm kind of sensitive to it because I know someone who was hauled before the ethics commission at a state level. And ultimately, it was decided that what he did was not, it had to do with reporting requirements. It was not a big deal. And he had some compliance issues. But what happens is the internet, folks, your name. And we all have concern about our name. You want to keep our good name. We don't want bad stuff out there. And so when you have something reported, and now you get Googled, and you have something like that, it looks like it's a bank robbery. And it affects your future employment possibilities. So I have really, I'm kind of sensitive to that, knowing that situation and looking at our ordinance. And I hope we do aggressively make some changes to that in the near future. That's all.
Thank you.
I don't want to repeat myself over and over again, but I think we need an ethics ordinance. I don't think this is the appropriate one. I think it's written poorly. I think everyone here actually agrees with that. I think a committee should be appointed to review and revisit this. I know that Joe's already looked at this, reported back to us. I think he had a lot of misgivings about it. So, I mean, we can keep reviewing it, coming up with the same conclusion, I think, but I think
Do you have any other suggestions as far as process? Because I know the Ethics Commission themselves had some suggestions, which we didn't take up.
Their suggestions were what?
I don't have them in front of me, but you remember them. There was a
Essentially, they
few
were going
pages.
to review it and make amendments.
And they
that
did,
sort of
and they
thing.
made some suggestions. This was maybe 5, 6 years ago. I mean, it's a long time ago, but we still have them, is my point.
Well, that's another way to do it, although I would suggest that they're going to get involved in doing it. I would think that it would be better that it be drafted from scratch, because I think what this ethics ordinance was a combination and a collective of all kinds of different things from different jurisdictions, and it doesn't read correctly, it doesn't flow, it doesn't make sense in many situations. There was a preamble, I think they called it in the beginning, that was actually being enforced, which made no sense to me. So, sure, I'm open to that. They're familiar with it. If they want to draft something from the beginning and start that process, I'd be fine with that.
Good. Any other comments? All right, we'll keep working on it, and I'll bring it back again. Number 10, discussion on the proposed ordinance establishing distribution of advertising matter in newspapers on private property. Again, this is something that Carrie Olson is looking at, and I did send to her the minutes from the public hearing as well as the Board of Selectmen's meeting. And I've also had several conversations, and it's been through email, mostly with Brian McHenry, who's here tonight to give a report. So Brian, did you want to give us an update, I should say? And thank you both for coming tonight.
In addition to, I'm Brian McHenry, the Circulation Operations Director for the current. George Madera is also here. He's a Field Operations Manager for the area. And we also have Bob Renison and his wife Danielle. They are Bob is the owner of the distribution company Renison LLC, who services the area with the product.
Thank you for all coming.
After last night's meeting, the last meeting, we obviously started to make phone calls with Bob. Bob was texting George through the meeting, trying to get updates of how it was progressing. And George had spoken with Bob, and also I did too. And we brought up the concerns that we heard from the folks. I think one of the big ones was the method of delivery, or the fact that people, I think, were delivering off the back of a truck. That was taken care of the following day. Those people are no longer delivering according to Bob, what Bob is saying. In addition to that, we took all the addresses that we had received, anybody who had mentioned them that evening. We got the stops in effective for the next delivery. George Madera has been out into the area on a regular basis, making sure that he's picking those up. Bob also has his staff also going out. We are moving everybody who has requested a stop onto a DND, which is a do not deliver list. Besides just having a stop in, we're just saying that no product at all. And the folks are going out with both lists, a route delivery list and also a do not deliver list, in order to maintain that they don't get the paper. With the snow melt that has been occurring, George went out and he picked up 30 pieces from there, and there were a few calls of some other issues where there were multiple copies, and we took care of that. I do know that there were a couple of Harper Current related issues too with some folks who were here. I think those were taken care of very quickly. And so, you know, we are committed to making this work. We don't think that there's an ordinance is necessary in order to do this. We think we have the process in place. We've got Bob here. Bob is committed to doing it also, and okay.
I have not gotten any further complaints, other than an interest from some people that this is very important to them, and they appreciate us following through and making sure that there is a good resolution to particular problems.
Okay. Well, one
Kitch,
last
did
item.
you- yeah,
I'm
I don't
sorry.
know if Kitch had something.
I was going to ask you, had you heard
No.
anything more? And I have not heard anything more. So.
Which is good.
And I would say that there have been 24 calls since the, right around the time that we had the meeting, I think, as word was starting to get out, in order to stop it. And we have put those in place, and we have stopped those accounts or addresses.
Fred, did you have something?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to frighten them a little bit. When I came back, I was away for several days, and this was back a few weeks ago. It was in my driveway, and I've had the same problem that a lot of folks who contacted you have had. And so I would hope that if we keep it like we do in a lot of items on the agenda, so if there's no problem, I have no problem with coming up with an ordinance. But if for some reason it becomes a problem again,
We will keep it on.
we'll keep it on.
Can I have your address?
Pardon?
Can I have your address, please?
I'm sorry, I got it.
Oh,
You want your.
so don't I.
Oh,
Can I have your address,
no,
please?
no, remember, I have a cold and I.
All right.
Address is 6-1 East Main Street, and it's of course important.
Okay. And was that this past week, or was that a previous issue?
61 East Main Street.
No, did the issue, the old copy that you had, was that previously, or was that this past week?
This is a previous one.
Okay.
It's not recent. No, I haven't had anything in several weeks.
Okay. All right.
Susan?
Thank you. Catch?
Yes, I was just wondering, has any thought been given to the idea of opting in rather than opting out?
Well, again, if the product is being delivered, we also have received 5 complaints about missed deliveries over the course of the last couple of weeks,
Okay.
too. So we think that people want it. You know, one of them went into a grocery store saying, I didn't get it, so we have that importance that it is to folks. And we'll just continue to monitor. What Bob Brenneson has also said is, as part of a catch-all, too, is that when the Saturday paper is delivered, he will have his folks take a look to see if anything is still laying out in the driveways or laying out on the property and look to remove those. And we're going to monitor to see if we get any no paper complaints from it, but probably anybody who wants the product will have picked it up within, let's say, 24 hours.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much for
Thank you.
coming tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. We're ready to move on to the next. This is another matter in terms of the sidewalks. I would suggest that maybe we still have a sidewalk committee, don't we?
We do. Yes, we do.
Who's on that committee? Just 2 of you?
Yes.
Yes. In terms of furthering this, we did have some comments from Attorney Chudwick, who was here. We also had some discussion at this level, and I'm not sure what the board would like to do, if you would like to continue in terms of the repeal of this ordinance, or whether you want to wait until you have a replacement before you repeal.
Michael and I think, can try to meet, well, we can meet, I'm sure, before the next meeting and come up with a specific suggestion so we can move this along. The repeal, no one's made a motion to repeal, so I'm assuming that is not going to happen.
I'll make a motion.
Okay, there is a motion now. All right, Brian made a motion. For sake of discussion, I'll second it, Brian.
Okay.
Philosophically, I happen to agree with that. However, practically, I realize that there'd be an expense as far as implementing the program. And since we do have fortunately have an ongoing complete streets group with, and we'll have a sidewalk committee operating for the bonding, I think we can come up with a plan to specify what actually we want to do. We do have a little conundrum because we have already okayed a bonding request, and also the bonding request also said that at the schools within as I remember, within a half a mile of the schools, this was our target area. So yet we'll have an ordinance that says that property owners are responsible. So there's a conflict we have to resolve, and maybe we can meet as a committee because we have other items I know tonight, but and come back with a recommendation. Maybe what we should do is come back with a half mile and concentrate on that, and then just so that would just be a suggestion to add to the ordinance that within 1/2 mile the town assumes responsibility for the sidewalks. So that.
I can't even imagine, so now we're going down a whole other road. So I think what we've heard from every attorney involved in this, who's researched this and looked at this, including attorney Chudwick, what's his name? Bruce? Chudwick, sorry, thank you.
Yep.
Essentially, even what he was saying is that this is improper, and if anyone ever challenges it, they're going to win. I think everyone, all the advice has been that these ordinances don't pass muster. And from a legal standpoint, I don't think they fly, so I think they should just be deleted. And from a practical standpoint, Fred, the town has already paid for some sidewalks and not others. So I don't think you can apply this unequally and pay for one person's sidewalk and force another person to pay to replace or repair a sidewalk. I mean, that on every level, that just seems illegal and inappropriate and improper. To then go ahead and suggest that we're going to do it for certain areas of town and not other areas of town, you're just asking for tons of trouble here. I can't imagine how any of that flies. So, to me, the ordinance is not appropriate. It should be deleted, and we go from there in terms of, I mean, the town has certain obligations and responsibilities, one of them being sidewalks, and I think that's just the law. And we went through this bonding process to repair and replace sidewalks, and I think that's your plan, that's your alternative, and that's how you're gonna replace what's missing from this ordinance. So-
One thing I want to point out is that if you, I think we need a replacement ordinance, first of all. I think before I won't vote for this to repeal without replacement.
Can I just ask, what sort
Can
of
I,
replacement?
well, in here, Brian, there is, there's Division 1, which is general, and then Division 2, snow and ice on sidewalks. And I believe there's other parts of this as well. So we can't just repeal the whole ordinance because there are sections of it that we need to maintain, particularly in this time of year, when in regard to
Oh, I
snow and
agree.
ice.
I thought, based on the agenda, that we're limited to 1781, 1782, and 1783, which is Division 1. I thought that's all that we've been talking
Well,
about.
the whole ordinance, I believe, is everything.
Oh, well, no, if, I don't want to be mistaken here. The second section that deals with snow and ice, I think that's totally appropriate and proper, and that follows state law. I think there's nothing wrong with that. It seemed to me that we've always been limited to section 1781 through 1783, and that's what I'm talking about, just to make myself clear. So, to me, to replace that with an ordinance, I just don't understand what kind of ordinance you would replace it with, because it is the town's obligation to repair and replace sidewalks.
Well, there was some discussion during the public hearing as to whether there would be something on the order of the sidewalks are replaced, and then going forward, if there's something that occurs, there may be some responsibility for contiguous landowners, particularly when there's issues that might be responsible for the contiguous landowners. We did talk a little bit about that.
You're talking about
I
trees?
know, yeah, there's trees, there's trucks that drive over sidewalks, there's things that get dropped on sidewalks. The other potential is, and we talked a little bit about sharing of the cost of sidewalks, which is something that I don't think we discussed a whole lot on.
Sharing with whom?
The landowners nearby,
Okay.
the contiguous landowners. What I have seen in some communities, where, particularly where the sidewalks are really in bad shape, they have been replaced and then by the town, and then going forward, there is some type of sharing between the landowner and the community or the town. It is an enormous amount of money for the town to take on. I would like to have new sidewalks. I'm trying to be practical and make sure that we have a good plan in place. I am anxious to get the $1 million that we've passed and get sidewalks replaced. Those are likely gonna be on state highways as well, which is another issue we haven't dealt with. The state says you, the town, are responsible for the right-of-way, which is where the sidewalks are. The sidewalks are your responsibility. But we've had discussion here where we don't have 100% agreement on that. So there's a lot of issues on sidewalks in the town. Besides just the repealing of this, there's also what are you gonna do in the future, and what are you gonna do for the state roads? Because 66 has sidewalks and 17A has sidewalks.
In some ways, the repeal doesn't matter, because it's a practical matter, none of this is taking place. You're not, I assume, you're not sending a bill to an adjacent landowner asking them to pay for that, are you? Ever?
What I'm saying is, I think we need to talk about it and decide how we're gonna proceed, whether or not it's total, the town takes care of everything, or whether there's some other, middle-of-the-road response to this.
So I guess
That's my thought.
I'm just looking at this really from a legal standpoint. So it sounds like you retained or asked two different attorneys to look at this, if I understand this, and they have both said, essentially, it seems to me, that it is the town's obligation. And Bruce Chudwick laid out a test, and it would seem to me that that could never be passed. So it seems to me that this ordinance is illegal, it's not lawful. So I don't know why we would want to keep it on the books. And all we're doing is, so some poor person who looks at this ordinance and thinks it's their obligation, goes out and pays $10,000 to repair a public sidewalk, and it's not their legal obligation. I just don't think that's right under any circumstances, that we're leading taxpayers to think that it's their obligation when all the information that we've been provided legally is that it's unlawful. So, and I think people have already been penalized because people have gone out and repaired their sidewalks, probably in accordance with this ordinance, which, again, from all the information we've been provided, is unlawful. So I don't know why we want to do that, and then just to reiterate again, I don't know how the town can pick and choose and say, we're gonna fix that person's sidewalk and not that person's sidewalk. We're gonna do it for this business, but not that business. We're gonna do it for downtown Main Street, but not someone who lives on a different road. I just don't think we can apply the law that way. It just seems totally wrong on any level.
From a practical point of view, how are you gonna pay for everybody's sidewalk to be replaced? There needs to be a plan in place, is what I'm saying.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
don't-
totally disagreeing
Sure.
with you. I'm not
I
totally
actually-
disagreeing.
Listen,
But
I
want a
don't,
plan in
I don't
place.
want the town to have to pay for everything either, but if it is unlawful and illegal to force somebody to do it, and we're going to apply it unequally.
Well, then you need a plan. If you're gonna take care of all the sidewalks, then are you gonna do the ones right next to the schools first? Are you gonna do the ones near the town properties
Okay, so
first?
that doesn't seem to be an ordinance.
Then are you
me.
going to, well, I think you really need to put something in writing, because what happens is this. No,
Sure,
no.
but you're not gonna pass an ordinance saying it's the town's obligation to repair and replace sidewalks, and we're going to do Main Street first and, some other streets second. I mean,
How
that
about
wouldn't be an ordinance.
how about another plan? A plan in terms of how you pay for it? I mean,
Okay, but that's not
I
an
don't have the
ordinance.
answers, but I'm
Sure.
presenting it as a practical issue and a practical matter, because, the Public Works Department, and by extension, the First Selectman, has to implement this.
If in fact the lawyers are right and it's the town's obligation, then you have to implement some sort of plan and take care of it. I mean, to me, it's just that simple.
Michael?
Yeah, just a couple things. I agree with you, Brian. If it's not enforceable, why have it be on there? But the other two issues with regards to the money, the bond was specifically targeted for that within a half mile of the schools. I believe it said that in the bond itself. But
That's a different
no,
issue.
no,
Yes.
exactly. That's exactly right. So that's a separate issue. So, but I think what we should do, and we'll get together within the next week or so, certainly by the next meeting, and come up with a general way of dispersing funds. So it's at the discretion of the town. As funds are available, do something that allows us to handle the ordinance in a general way, because the money that we have right now is very specific to that money.
Again,
So
that's
two
not
separate
an
issues.
ordinance.
Right,
That's-
it's not an ordinance,
That's
just-
a bond issue. It's already
Right.
been defined what's going to be taken care of first.
Exactly.
It's the discretion of the town to
Right.
do whatever sidewalks they want to do. I don't
Right.
think you'd want to put a plan in place handcuffing you, saying you have to do
Oh, no,
one
I'm
road
saying,
over another road.
no, I'm saying we don't put that in the ordinance should be something, if we're gonna replace it with something, it should be something general, not specific.
I don't think you're replacing it with anything, because it doesn't seem to me that there's an ordinance that you would apply to replace this.
Are there
I
other
think-
comments?
And, well, if we
Ben?
are going down that road of getting rid of this, and I think Brian's right, it's gonna be difficult to enforce, if not impossible. But we do need a plan, like you said, Susan. We have to figure out a way to pay for it, and I think, well, I know in the referendum, we had $1 million set aside, and I do believe we have $3 million in road, and the reality is if we do identify now, which we're going to be going out and starting that half-mile radius in the schools, and we start to identify that we're probably in the, say, $2 million range, I think it would be, and I don't know how if we're allowed to, I think if we don't spend the full road, we're allowed to transfer to another line item that we had, so we could.
Like if there's residual dollars.
Yeah. So, in other words, if we had to, we could possibly make it 2 million and 2 million or whatever. But these are the conversations that have to be had. If we are gonna go down this road, and we are gonna take on this, liability, cause that's what it's gonna become, we better have our ducks in order in a row and know how to fix this, because it's gonna be very costly.
Now, you've
Attorney
had
Sedgwick,
one,
sorry.
you've had one public hearing. Do you wanna have another public hearing on this? I don't know how many of you were able to be there. I mean, whenever you repeal, whenever you add an ordinance, you have to have a public hearing. There was a public hearing. I don't think it hurts to have a second public hearing, and I would be willing to vote for a public hearing on this and hear a little bit more from people and proceed for rescission. I just feel
don't care.
uncomfortable rescinding, Brian, without some solid direction as to where we're gonna go with sidewalks. I'm sorry, Brian?
I don't care if you hear from the public, that's fine, but it does seem to be a legal issue to me. So we've asked 2 lawyers their opinions, and essentially they're saying that this is unlawful. So, you know, and it has consequences. Like I said, people repair the sidewalks and they pay money. And if we decide to tell someone they have to do it, then you're forcing that person to appeal. They have to spend money to file that appeal. They have to hire attorneys to do that. And it seems like we all know what the end result is. So it just seems unfair on every level that we know that this is unlawful, and we're gonna force people to either repair or replace their sidewalks or file appeals when we know that we are wrong.
Kitch, did you wanna add something?
Yes, so a couple of things come to mind. I'm not in favor of repealing this now, and maybe we don't need an ordinance other than Division 2. But I think that we have to figure out who's gonna inspect sidewalks and then help make the determination of order of repair or rebuild. And I think that's something that the sidewalk committee needs to take a look at. It may be a good idea after the committee's met at least 1 or 2 times and have some groundwork to then have another public hearing. So there'd be some information that could come from the sidewalk committee, and then we could hear from residents about how they feel about what needs to be done. And I agree with Brian, we're gonna hear some complaints from people who have laid out a lot of money to have their sidewalks repaired, and now suddenly we're going to do the legal thing. But I think we're not ready to have that discussion yet. So I think and we've had some appointments to the committee, right, as well?
Well, there's 2. One is the Complete Streets Group that's gonna
Right.
be implementing the money part of the bond for the $1 million for the sidewalks. And then the Selectmen, it's Fred and Michael that meet with me to talk
Okay.
about sidewalk issues and public works.
So I think the players are in place, so there needs to be identification of which sidewalks need to be repaired in what order.
Essentially, like a policy, spider cracks versus a lip, that sort of thing.
Right,
I
the
think
tow
that-
trap.
Right, and I think we should possibly now come up with a policy, because if we are gonna get rid of this, we need a policy in place so Susan can have the answer when someone calls and says,
Yeah.
what is the protocol, you know, what are the steps? So let's do that. Let's come up with something that's practical, and obviously, if this is the road we're going down, let's do it right and get all the information we need and come up with a policy that then says what we're doing, so everybody knows.
I don't know why everyone is concerned with rescinding this ordinance, because it's not being enforced by the town in the first place. And all this ordinance is doing, if anybody happens to look or think they're required to do it, is they're gonna go out and spend their own money repairing or replacing a sidewalk. And we know that it's unlawful to force them to do that, or even lead them to believe that it's their obligation to do that.
Two things. The attorneys did say that while they are not sure it would stand a challenge, they did not say that it's definitely, as you said, illegal. They said it can be challenged, it is in many communities. Many communities have these types of ordinances, and that was told to me, so just that fact. Secondly, the reason I'm pushing for a second public hearing is whatever we do with sidewalks, it's going to be the people that are members of this community that are going to pay for it. So I think it's important that we publicize it some more, that there be some public talk about it, and then take a look at actually rescinding. Simply because when we talked about this at the public hearing for the bond authorization, some of that discussion, because it was more publicized, we had a few people who did come and said, you better make sure you get our input before you start changing the way at least it is on the books for sidewalks. So what I'm asking is for the current motion and its second to be to set a public hearing, which could be in April, because we are going to be pretty busy in March with the budget, for either the first or second meeting in April. And maybe by then, the sidewalk committee will have met and we'll have some information. I think it's very important that the community at large, because there's many, many people in town who do not have sidewalks in front of their properties. And they will be paying for the sidewalks in those areas of the town that do have them. So it's just sort of a, make sure everybody knows what we're doing, is what I'm saying.
Sure, I personally don't want to have to pay for public sidewalks, particularly public sidewalks that I don't generally use. But we've heard from two lawyers. One, I thought, actually said that she thought it was improper. The other gave sort of a wink and a nod, but suggested that it would never pass muster. So that's where I stand.
And
What about my question about another public hearing before you
That's
actually?
fine.
All right, so
I
are you
can-
changing your motion to a
I'll
public hearing?
withdraw it. I'll
The
move for
second
a public
meeting-
hearing, sure.
Do you want to have a second meeting in April? Does that give us enough time?
Yeah.
I don't have that date, but the second meeting in April, or for a public hearing on this repeal of this section of the sidewalk. Is that okay with you as well, Fred?
It is.
So their motion and second was withdrawn, and they're making a
Second.
motion for a public hearing on the rescission on this topic.
And Susan, I would also, I would
Yes.
add to that, if we could have discussion on potential policy at the same meeting, because.
Sure.
And just one of the
Absolutely.
things that comes to mind that we're gonna wanna think about is
Yes.
there's a lot of sections that have brownstone sidewalks.
Yes,
And I
yes.
actually just heard the other day, some of them are messed up
They are.
gravestones that are facing down, and the back sides were, so they're, it's pretty neat, there's a lot of neat history, so, in our ordinance, for example, if there is a section of brownstone sidewalk and we don't want it removed, and there is a trip hazard, we should figure out how our policies to deal with it, if it's just re-leveling them, having the highway crew, but these are the things we're gonna, if we're
Right.
going down that road, we should have a policy that says what we're gonna do in all the circumstances.
And I think as Kitch pointed out, there are people who are the sidewalk responsible
Inspectors.
agent. They're the inspectors. And there was one of the ordinances that I think Michael Aguilotti shared with us, that in, I believe it might have been Middletown, where they actually have somebody that is responsible for identifying,
Mhm.
marking, and then making sure repairs are made. We're not even there yet. What we're at is total replacement of many of these sidewalks. But we're gonna be talking about money in March, so it would be very interesting to talk about this, the second meeting in April, 19 of April, thank you, let's make it 7 o'clock.
Money in March.
We'll issue the public hearing notice for that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, any abstentions? Motion carries. And in that same meeting, we'll talk about a report from the sidewalk committee, and perhaps the other committee will also. But I will add, they need additional members for that, the complete streets / sidewalks. They need additional members. We appointed, I think, 3 or 4.
They need 5. There aren't many.
Yeah.
Susan, from a timeframe standpoint, when can we start spending that $1 million on sidewalks? Clearly, we've identified there's a lot of areas within that half acre. I don't believe we have to wait until it doesn't need to be tied in.
Well, we have to get the money first, and
Yep.
that's something that maybe Tom could help us with, at some point.
Because what I'm getting at is the park may take longer, the roads may take longer to identify the sidewalks.
We can start doing tomorrow.
because the most likely, okay, the park is a bonded matter, where you have to go out and get the financial advisor to assist you in going out to market and getting rating and then issuing the bonds. In the meantime, you can do the bands, which is in the budget for this coming year. You'll see it. Some of that is in there. No, but there is some band money. I don't know if it's specifically for that. And then the sidewalks and the roads, we are still looking, Tom, at whether USDA rural development is a potential, whether or not their interest rates are good, all that. Go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I'm not really, I just walked in, I know what you're talking about, so I don't know what you're talking about, but.
The portion of the bonds
So
associated with
right now, I mean,
sidewalks.
right now, I mean, we're going into the budget cycle. The budget cycle comprises of a $1.6 million lease. That would probably be the first component that will go pop off in July. That needs to get funded and financed through July through probably the first payment would be in March. So you have to get everything in purchased and by that point. There has been some progress and development on some of the $500,000 projects. When the FA put together the first potential bond issuance, there was monies for the parks, there's money for the roads, and monies for the $500,000 of projects. I believe maybe a little bit for sidewalks. You know, it all depends on how you know, everyone can get done and all the work we have accomplished. There's a finite amount of people to do these tasks, and we continue to work on other components, and we'll try to do our best to accomplish some of these tasks at hand. But I think that the lease will be the first thing that'll hit in July. There is, you know, obviously there's parks are meeting and going through their pieces and see what they can get accomplished for the big park. We have been met with the HVAC vendors for this building, for the units up here. We have met with the HVAC vendor for the furnaces at the highway garage and at Fire Company 1. It likely will be to need to go an RFP. We'll likely need to go out for an architect for the roofs at 2, the highway garage, and the windows at the Buck Foreman building. So those are all components, and I think sometime in March, Susan and I and probably Rick will meet with the FA and try to go through some of the timing of these projects. Obviously, the main focus in the March period was to accomplish a budget for the March 1st deadline. That was accomplished and has been issued since then, as well as the revenue numbers keep changing from the state. So we continue to review those components. So that's kind of where we are right now from the standpoint that I'm aware of.
Okay, that's helpful. We also need to speak with Bruce Chudwick about the management of the park project, and we'll be working with Ralph on that, as well as Brian, who is the chairman of that committee. Thank you, Tom. Okay, the next item is action on fixed assessment agreement for Brainerd Place project. And the Selectmen had, I will briefly review, had met last Wednesday in an executive session and had sent back to BRT I don't know whether I call it a counter, I call it the town's proposal for a fixed assessment agreement. And BRT responded to that, and I shared that with the Selectmen, and they have in their packets one agreement that would be with the town's proposal, and the second agreement was Mr. Bertram through BRT, their proposal. In speaking with Bruce Chudwick, he said one thing that can happen with the counter is that the Selectmen can amend that or not, it's up to them. And I would bring that to you, so I brought you both agreements. I brought you components of that. I sent out some information on some fiscal analysis that the finance office had assisted me with. And also, in terms of BRT, there is a counter to our last offer to them. And it's here tonight in the person of Mr. Fred Hassan, who is the owner of the property at Elmcrest. And Mr. Hassan had given me a letter which gives him permission. I'll sign it. It's signed by the applicant, Mr. Bertram, to act on his behalf tonight with a counter to the town's offer. So this is just a simple letter. And I don't know, Fred, Fred also saw me at 5:30 this afternoon and gave me a replacement for Exhibit B and the last counter. Do you want me to hand those out now, Fred? And this is the only section that is going to be discussed. The other sections, I am going to presume, would be the town's last offer. Well, what you had indicated to me is that this is the meat of the matter. So I don't know if you wanted to explain this, Fred? It'd be better if you took the microphone.
Soliciting about sidewalks is a never-ending need for money, right? No matter what it is, and
There are some extras here.
and we're trying to bring money to cover some of these things, right? And
I think people want to just pass. There's some extras I made so that you're not wondering what we're talking about here. You could share them.
so anyhow, there was a lot of negotiations going on between BRT, their attorney, Susan Bransfield, the town's attorney, and they came to,
If you could share them, I'd appreciate it.
there was movement from BRT, but my understanding of the numbers, there was not much movement on the part of the town. In fact, maybe they deteriorated a little bit. But be that as it may, basically it comes down to, there's two issues. But the main issue is the amount of the assessment. And BRT is at their absolute limit. What they ask for is what they have to have, or they're not going to do it. So I, representing the property owners, decided that we would participate. And we would reduce the price of the land by $240,000, right, to BRT. And then he can pay $240,000 more in the assessment. And that's what's reflected there on the amended March 1 assessment. And the reason why we're doing that is because in the spirit of what the doctors did over there at Elmcrest, right? I think they would prefer to see the project that is presently being proposed built. So we're willing to take a hit on that, right? As long as, and these agreements are predicated on getting a vote, right? And getting an agreement signed by March 3rd. And that basically, so that basically we're adding 240,000. There was previously negotiations that increased the town's tax by 600,000, right? So this 240 would be 840,000. Flat, 15% a year for ease of administration, gives you the money up front. If you want to allocate it to repairing sidewalks, that's up to you, right? But there's probably enough money that you will get over the 8-year period to repair all of the sidewalks.
I had shared with the selectmen over the last few days some analysis of what BRT's first proposal was. And I asked Tom to help me prepare what the analysis would be for this current proposal. So I'm going to pass those papers out. So it helps you a little bit in terms of some of those numbers that I had sent out by way of email to the school.
Right. The second item, and
Fred, I don't know if you, could you pass that to him, please? He does not have that. I just wanted to show this if I could, because it needs a little bit of an explanation for the board. Again, there's a few copies here. I don't have enough for everybody, but again, I don't have a slide to put up above, so. This was an analysis that the finance and the assessor's office did to help us in terms of this very important decision on a tax incentive for the property. The taxes that would be paid with no incentive and a full build-out on the $30 million project, we would estimate to be $6,237,000 over the course of 14 years, Tom? 14 years, because of the 2 phases. So not everything is done, certainly in the first phase, it's over 2 phases.
well, that's 8 years.
Well, when you actually have it all out, and this analysis is not just on the full building. This analysis of the 6.237 million includes the interim taxes that would be due before the certificate of occupancies are assigned. So all of these numbers include that factor as well as the full build-out CO'd property. And that's why Tom is saying it's more of a 14-year spread. The taxes to be paid to the town should the 15, 15, 20, 20, 35, and 40%, which is the town's last offer, be realized, would be $2,598,750. With the revised counter from you, Fred, at 15% for all 7 years, and it includes the non-CO'd years as well, would be $2,113,650. The other thing that I think is important for the taxpayers to know is what is the incentive? What is a dollar figure associated with the incentive that would go to BRT? Under the town's offer, the total taxes not paid, in other words, what is the incentive? Under the town's offer, it's $3,638,250. Under this revised counter proposal, the total taxes not paid, in other words, the incentive to BRT under this new offer, or this new counter, I should say, would be worth $4,123,350. The difference is between the town's offer and the counter offer. Over 14 years, the difference is $485,100. So that includes the $240,000 that has been added to this. So the difference per year, based on the 2 phases, between what the town's offer is and what this new counter is to the town's offer, is $34,650 a year. Do you have any questions on that? I thought it would be helpful to have that information.
Just a clarification, the town's offer was a take it or leave it offer, correct?
A take it or leave it offer. I don't know that it's a take it or leave it. I think what we asked Bruce to do is to present it to BRT, and I brought back to the selectmen his counter, which was in that agreement that I gave to you. Fred, did you want to add anything?
I think the numbers pretty much speak for themselves. So the one other issue, and we did have a little discussion on this, Susan, right, is that the first building was going to be built on a 70-30 split, no more than 30%, 2 bedrooms. And on the second building, it's the intent to do the same thing, but you never know when you're going down the line what the absorption rates and things of that nature, and you have to finance these things. So we just wanted to amend that it would be no more than 60-40. So that there might be, in the worst case scenario, 12 extra 2-bedroom units, but there would be less units overall because they would be taking up space that was allocated for 1-bedrooms. So it doesn't have a major impact on anything, but rather than have to come back and hammer it out when you're trying to finance these things, we just like to have that. So so I think if we can get the town participation, the developer and the landowner, I mean, I don't know if we can get much better than that. So if we can get a vote tonight and get this thing signed, which was predicated on all these agreements, we had hoped to do this in January, right? Then we got ourselves a deal. Maybe we could produce some money so you can fund those sidewalks or whatever else you need to fund, particularly if you have the budget coming up next month, and it'd be good to know that something might be in the works. And again, you get the money faster, so even if there might be a little bit difference, you get the money faster because the incentive is spread evenly over the whole 7 years at 15% for ease of administration and to give you additional cash flow up front. And
The one area I think, Fred, and I'll speak for myself, that I think is important, and it's because BRT has stated the 70-30 is for all of the housing. And I think that's important to have in the agreement. If there's a need in several years, that can always be looked at. But I think in terms of how this is put together, that's critical for the town, and I'll speak as the first selectman.
and why might it be critical for the town?
Because of expenditures. We know that with the 70-30, and it's something that we talked about in public hearings, it's things we've talked about here, it really allows the town to be able to predict that the costs associated with the services that will need to be administered is contained. And that is valuable, because when we incur additional services, that's very expensive. So while we're not meeting the total amount that was requested, I think that is of great value, the 70-30, and I would insist that that be for all of the housing on the campus.
If you have absorption rates that are not justifying that, right? I don't think by adding 12 units of 2 bedrooms and taking away probably 3 or 4 or probably 6 of 1 bedrooms, right, will impact the service to the town at all over 240 units.
Well, we're trying to
And
find
the
a
reason
deal
that-
that will work, and
well,
that will work.
Right, so what happens is, you can see that the process of doing things is very, very difficult, right? And we're talking about years down the line, and we don't know who we're dealing with, whatever, right? And we just like to get as many items buttoned down as we can.
As does the other side, as does both sides. And I think to predicate today on what we already knew, which was the 70-30, is what the agreement needs to say. And I believe Mr. Bertram when he said that, and all of the people that heard that believe that, and I think that's important to insist that it be in the agreement. And with that, it's something that I feel I could support.
I have a few
Can I say-
questions. Oh, sorry.
Could I
Yep,
just say one?
Kathy?
I just wanted to agree with what Brian said. I thought that when we discussed it last week, that we said this was our final offer, and that was it, and that was what was gonna go back to Mr. Bertram. And I think we put Susan in a bad position because she was the sole person going right to the developer and discussing this. But I also don't think that we should be discussing this in public, which is what we had brought up previously. I don't think it's a forum for it.
Okay, I asked Bruce Chudwick about that, and he said that this was public at this point, so I'm
Yeah,
sorry,
well-
but that's what I was told.
Yeah, and we're here, so let's, well, we've already talked about it, so I have a few questions for Tom. He's probably the best guy to answer this. Tom, if I may, Susan?
Sure.
All right. Using the numbers of the developer, he says there's gonna be 18 or 20 children in the school system. Using Portland's numbers, do you know what it costs to educate a child in Portland? Yeah, I used 12 for my numbers here. So over the 14 million, just in the education of those 20 children would be $3.36 million.
I take exception to that.
Well, hang on, let me, and maybe because you're not fully aware of what we're gonna be facing with these budgets in the future.
Yep.
And I think the reality is, the town of Portland's gonna be looking for a lot of money soon with these state cuts. And the reality is, we don't have room to cut other than potentially, increasing class sizes or things of that nature. And when I say that, don't take off the table removing a teacher per grade in order to make our budget balanced, because people can't handle a 3 mil increase or a 2 mil increase in this little town. So I know you made the statement that they can absorb it. Well, the reality is, we may be already beyond what we can absorb when these class sizes may be potentially changing in our next budget. So the reality is, just using the numbers and what it does cost to educate somebody, you got over $3 million. Portland's incentive plan was only 4.1 coming in total. BRT's counter is 3.6. We proposed a very fair offer. I was under the impression it was a final take it or leave it offer. I agree with Susan on the 30-70, that's what was said. She's right. And you may be saying only 12 units, but Susan knows and we know that's a big deal. I think we put a fair offer on the table. I think the majority of the Board of Selectmen would agree with that statement. I do not, you used the phrase faster. You're getting the revenue faster. And I know you're an accountant, Fred. When our proposal is 15% in year one is what we put on the table. And your proposal is 15% in year one. Year two, 15% on our proposal. Yours, 15%. Year three, 20. Yours, 15. Yours then stays at 15, ours goes to another 20, a 30, a 35, and a 40. Explain to me how the town is gonna get taxes faster when the percentage is going down what we're going to be getting.
Because you're not gonna be getting it.
Oh, thank you. So it's slower.
No, because under your proposal, there'll be no project.
Okay.
Right, and as far as the school system,
Okay.
if you, and Tom can answer this, if you have 100 kids and you got a cost, it could be 12,000. If you add 12 kids, you gotta divide by 112. The average per student goes from 12,000 down. So your infrastructure, the lights, the heat is all there already. So adding 12 kids does not add any cost to the school.
When you're talking about class sizes changing dramatically and you would put it over the threshold, right now we like 16, 18. That's an acceptable class size in the town of Portland. In your proposal, even by increasing 3 children, and I know you say there's no cost, but I want to be crystal clear. If we then go over the threshold we as a town have picked, we then need to hire another teacher. Would you then agree there's a cost? Yes or no? It's a very, this is, to me.
The
it's-
superintendent of schools says there's excess capacity when we went through this before, and that you can absorb additional children without any problem.
Correct, and in fairness
Right.
to the superintendent, number one, he's not here. Number two, he probably realizes there's going to be serious budget issues coming up. And if he knew that he was going to have to be cutting a teacher per grade, I don't believe he would ever make that statement today. These are the realities that we're facing. The state of Connecticut is cutting us tremendously. We need to be in a position, and I know you say more revenue is great, but if your costs exceed the revenue, that's not great.
If the state of Connecticut is cutting your budget, you would think you would welcome a developer to come in and spend 30 million plus in your town and add tremendous amounts of money to the tax rolls, right? And help you balance your budget rather than to turn them away and detract from your budget. You should be looking for development, not opposing it.
And I would say well, first of all, I wouldn't say we oppose it. I think everybody here in the room now knows the numbers, and I don't think any one of us are ashamed of the numbers. We're talking about, the differences between what was proposed and what the town proposed and what BRT is now counter-proposing. Again, the town put a final offer on the table, once again, so the public knows. Year one, 15%. Year two, 15%. Year three, 20%. Year four, 20%. Year five, 30%. Year six, 35%. And year seven, 40%. That was a very fair offer. We're not talking about big revenue to the town when you minus cost. You're probably talking a net zero. But there is a value to having this development, like you said, at the corner. There's a major, other things come along with it, and we can all agree with that. And I think that's why this board came up with those numbers.
And you're not going to get those numbers. It was a negotiation. That's what you authorized Susan to negotiate. She negotiated, you negotiated.
No, they didn't agree with my numbers.
The developer has moved $840,000, right? The town has moved from what they put together a proposal before these negotiations at a different level. They've negotiated downward from those levels. The developer negotiated up, the town negotiated downward.
Fred, can I give you examples, seeing that we're not in executive session, and obviously now we're gonna start asking questions and hope to get answers. You say you lowered the price, and I thank you. That's a good faith gesture on your part to make this deal work.
That's
I
right.
think the town's done a lot of good to try to make it work. My question to you, on the record,
Yep.
is how much above the assessment, 2.5 million, is the offer?
The assessment,
The the property's valued at 2.5 million, or the assessment. How
well,
much?
that's a 70% number.
Correct. So how
And
much?
that's just one piece of property. You gotta take all the properties into consideration,
I
right?
thought Susan told us that was the full value of all
Right.
the lots.
I
Right.
don't know.
I
It's-
think,
it's
well,
not-
we would base.
We did use that.
It's
Yeah,
not
'cause that-
greater,
that's
it's
the
not
94
greater than the full assessment.
That was my question.
Right. It's
Okay.
not greater than the full assessment. There will be no income taxes paid by us on any gains.
Yep. Thank you for answering that. I wasn't sure if you would.
Trying to be transparent.
Yeah.
Trying to get a deal done,
Right. And,
right? So
and-
you have a proposed revised assessment, revised deal that narrows the gap to something that you can get a project going here quickly, right? Right? If you vote favorably, then we're off and running. If you vote unfavorably,